Welcome back to another episode of The Summer of Me. We are talking about mom guilt today. I posted a question box this week on my Instagram and asked what you guys want to talk about on the podcast. And so many of you just dropped right in there that you wanted to talk about mom guilt and the feeling like you're blowing up your kids' lives, or you're blowing up your own life, or you just feel like you can't escape the mom guilt. And I'm here to tell you that you are not alone. I think there is not a mom on the planet that probably doesn't struggle with this in some form or fashion. And if they don't, well, I don't know. Maybe that's a good thing, or maybe it's a bad thing. TBD. Probably depends on the mom. Anyways, I first and foremost want to start by just saying that like mom guilt is so real. It's something that you kind of like hear about, and maybe like if you don't have kids, people are like, oh, I have mom guilt or whatever. And you're like, what the fuck is that? Like, what are you talking about? And I think like at the very baseline, the definition of mom guilt is just like, it doesn't matter if I'm with my kids, if I'm not with my kids, if I have been like freaking award-winning mom of the year, or if I've been a piece of shit mom, I have guilt one way or the other for not feeling like I've done enough, or feeling like I'm going to screw my kids up, or feeling like I wasn't present. It can be a debilitating feeling if we don't address it. And at times, I think especially like when my kids were really, really little, even when I had like infants, I would be like, oh, I can't let somebody else hold you. Like, you're not going to feel bonded towards me. Or like, I can't leave you to go take a shower. And everybody's like, please go take a shower. You need this. And like, as they get older, it like really evolves into like quality time and conversation. And my kids are like, you're always busy and you're this. And just today I left to record a podcast in Memphis who's 4. I was like, what do you want to do today with Jacqueline, who is her nanny? And she's like, I want to spend quality time with you, Mom. And I was like, she's like, you're always podcasting and working. And the natural inclination is to be like, well, yes, do you see all these toys and all these things you have? Like, that is why I have to do those things. But our like psyche eats away at us and is like, you are a piece of shit, Mom. And you don't deserve children. And you are never around and you're never present and all those things. I remember like literally being with my kids 23.8 hours a day. And like the 0.2 was like maybe when they would fall asleep in their crib for like 4 minutes or whatever the math is on that. Math is not the strong suit over here. Anyways, and I would like put them to bed, and then I would like be like, oh, I got a break. And you sit and like scroll pictures of your kids. You're like, what am I doing? What is wrong with me? We love them so much. And I think that that's like the source of the guilt, is we just truly want the best for them. We want to give them everything and anything we could possibly imagine and make their life perfect and carefree and lovely. And I have bad news for you. Your kids are going to go to therapy, whether you are the best mom in the world or the worst mom in the world. They're going to be fucked up in one way or another. And they are going to have what everybody calls now like childhood trauma or triggers or whatever. So you can let yourself off a little bit easy knowing that you're never going to be perfect and they're going to be okay. But we are going to just kind of dive into the topic today and really get into it, get into the meat and potatoes, get into the cheeseburger of it. This is a cheeseburger podcast now, sponsored by Shake Shack, In-N-Out, and Five Guys. Okay, so like I said, my first kind of real experience with mom guilt was when my kids were very little, and anytime I would have to leave them. I also had like such severe anxiety about leaving them when they were really little. I was kind of like a stage 5 clinger, I guess. Now that I like look back on it, I was like obsessive about it. But I think that was like really my first feeling of like, oh my gosh, I can't, like, they're going to know that I left them with a babysitter, or they're going to feel like, lost without me. And I think some of that is like us parlaying our own feelings or insecurities or whatever onto our kids. But it's also like this societal norm, which is like, you're a mom, you chose to have these kids, your husband's going to like go to work, and you're going to raise your kids. And obviously that is like an archaic way of thinking now. And fortunately, like, I feel like as a society, we have come a long way, but there are these like roles that we have like kind of been raised on or leaned into. And so as a mom, you feel like anything I do is reducing my kids to less than, or like making them not as much of a priority. As a parent who's been divorced now, like I look at my life and like my kids' lives and my mom guilt, and like my guilt, it comes from a very different place. It comes from a place of like, wow, I blew my kids' lives up. I made them first I made them move across the country and then we got a divorce and now they have 2 households and like they don't get to have all their clothes in one place and what an inconvenience for them. And, they might need like something at their dad's and we don't have time to get it before school. And I mean, I could literally do a whole podcast just sitting here rambling on about like all the things that like I could create in my mind that I would feel guilty about. And I guarantee you, if you're listening to this, you probably can too. Oh, I'm away from my kids too much. I work too hard. I spent too much time on my phone. I like on and on and on and on. Like, let's not, I'm not going to bore you with the details, but I bet your details are very similar to mine. As a divorced parent, I feel like we'll go out to dinner and I'll see families and they have both parents sitting at the table and their kids. And I'm like, man, my kids don't get that like on a normal, obviously like, their dad and I like are very cordial and we do things together occasionally, but it's different. But I have guilt about that. Like, I mean, listen, I have guilt about the good. I got guilt about the bad. I got guilt up the Yahoo. Maybe that's TMI. But here's what I want to tell you. Guilt as a whole, like inherently says, I have done something wrong. I should have done something different. And I think that if it's important to kind of challenge the thought of guilt before we even dive into like the feelings and how to kind of cope with it and deal with it, is like guilt says like, I'm in the wrong. I shouldn't have done this. And I hope that like you don't look at your life or maybe what like the decisions that you're intending to make. And I know for me specifically, like I don't look at my life and say like, I shouldn't have got married. I shouldn't have had kids. I shouldn't work. I don't actually feel that way. And so it's challenging the thought of like, I'm guilty about everything. I'm guilty about the ways that I'm parenting. More so, it's just that I'm trying to balance things and figure out my priorities and accept that that's okay and safe and comfortable, and that's an okay way to proceed with my life. The premise of this episode and like what I want your takeaway to be about mom guilt is it's okay to teach our children about self-care. It's not selfish. The narrative that we write when we have mom guilt is I'm being selfish. And a lot of you guys said that in the comment box when I put that up on Instagram was like, how do you struggle with mom guilt and being selfish or feeling like your decisions are selfish? It's really important to remember that our kids don't repeat our words, they repeat our patterns. And so if your kids are watching you talk about how it's important to be, to prioritize yourself and take care of yourself, but you're over there not doing those things and you're with them 24/7 and you're never asking for help and you're never, leaving them with somebody so that you can go out and get your nails done or go to the gym or meet with friends or go on a date with your husband or whatever, they're going to do the same thing. And I'm telling you this because, and I just talked to my mom about this actually, I repeated the pattern that I was shown in my household, which was that my mom lived and died to do everything possible to be with us all the time. And that was the pattern that I saw. And that was the pattern that I repeated. It's the pattern that my sister repeated. And the goal is that we continue to improve and get better. And every generation breaks the curse or whatever you've heard it called. But I think with intentionality, we can show our kids that self-care is not selfish. And it's important whether you're a mom or whether you're a 5-year-old or whether you're, a 70-year-old man, like you should be taking care of yourself. And there's nothing selfish about that. Our kids can be a priority, but they don't have to be our only priority. Our kids should be a priority. They should be one of our main priorities. But I think where we go wrong is thinking that they should be our only priority. Also, that's how you raise like little bastard narcissists, is when they think that they're like the entire world and everything revolves around them. Side note. Some of the causes of mom guilt, I think, are just us putting an unrealistic amount of pressure on ourselves. I think there's a societal pressure. I actually was reading somebody else's Q&A. Maybe I spent too much time on Instagram. And somebody had asked them a question like, do you feel like you travel too much? Are you away from your kids too much? And this woman was like, I don't actually, like, I leave my kids maybe like 1 to 2 days a month. And like, otherwise I'm with them 24/7. But it's like all of these people asking questions. And then like you have, whether it's your mom saying something or somebody else in your life or your spouse or whatever. And we have this unrealistic amount of pressure on us as women to parent our kids. And unless you have intentionally set up a different dynamic, I feel like that is kind of the standard dynamic that kind of falls into place. And one of the things that in hindsight and like moving forward into another relationship that like I really think is important is setting that tone from the beginning. Hey, we are equal parts. You are the dad, I am the mom. You're not babysitting when you have the children. You are not taking over for me. You are the parent, I'm the parent. We can tag team this. And I think that everybody benefits from that role. Your kids benefit greatly because they have equal parenting time, equal time with both parents. You benefit greatly because you get time to have that self-care moment and do whatever you need to do for yourself. Your spouse gets time for themselves. And ultimately, I think that's a really important kind of boundary and dynamic to set from the get-go if that's what you're wanting in your life. Another huge source of mom guilt is comparison. We look at other families, we look at other moms. I know for me, I have never not worked. I got my first job as a barista at 14, I think. Probably like very unsafe to be making drinks. But anyways, I worked at Nordstrom, I worked at Amazon, I did like Etsy. I've always worked. And so there was never a moment in which I was like, oh, I'm just going to be a stay-at-home mom. And not that that's like a bad thing, but that was never my journey. That was never what I was able to do financially, and also not what I wanted to do. But I would look at other people and I'd be like, well, this mom's bringing her kids lunch to school and she's in the PTO or is it PTA or PTO? She's in the PT something. Anyways, first of all, I'm good, bro. I'm not interested in that life. But I do think that for me personally, even I look at other people's life and I'm like, man, am I doing a shit job because my kids don't ever have my it's not like they have a day where it's like you have mom's full attention. My kids constantly are like, you work too much. And I'm like, well, you have a lot. So I don't know what to tell you. I can just not work and we can live in a 1-bedroom apartment and shack up. Or Whitney read a book in the library, and she said it was something about 8 people in a family living in a shoe. And she's like, Mom, it reminded me so much of us. And I was like, I have worked too hard for you to think that we live in a shoe. It doesn't matter what you do. They're still going to think their life could be better. Another source of mom guilt that we have is this fear of making a mistake. It's like we're constantly trying to figure out, like, is this the right way to talk to them? Is this the right thing to do? Is this the right school to send them to? And you take that with like the pressure of, being like all the other families that you're around and seeing people that you admire the way they live their life or the way that you feel like you should be living your life. And then you add it with all the decisions that you have to make, whether it's private school or public school or preschool or no school or I don't know, school of life, whatever it is. Like there is so many freaking decisions, and no matter which one you have, you're likely going to have some layer of guilt that you didn't make the alternative decision. Our brain is a real bitch is what I've figured out. Like there is just sometimes no winning. And I think this is one of those situations where we have to give ourselves a massive amount of mercy and grace and just realize that like doing our best is really the hot ticket here. And if I've learned one thing in therapy, it's that awareness and acknowledgement are a massive key to kind of getting through something and growing through something. Just knowing that it exists and why it exists and where it's coming from allows you to kind of address the problem and say, hey, this is my brain playing tricks on me. This is not the reality for me. It's not the reality for my children. And here is the reality. So we're probably never going to get away from mom guilt. We can run, we can hide, but it's going to find us. So let's talk about a few ways that I have figured out how to cope with it or make it better, to lessen my mom guilt and also just to process it and handle it. First of all, and this is going to sound like so basic B and like, okay, whatever. But self-compassion and a little bit of forgiveness. I guarantee that you don't look at all the other moms in your circle and be like, she's doing an awful job. Like, oh, she should feel so guilty about the way she's raising her kids. Probably not. But we talk to ourselves that way. We think about ourselves that way. We put so much undue pressure on ourselves. And I think first and foremost, when you're having those spouts of mom guilt, whether it is because you are leaving and separating from your spouse or getting a divorce, or it's just like a normal Tuesday and you're like, shit, I didn't sign my kid up from gymnastics and I feel like a piece of shit mom. Two very different things, but the mom guilt exists equally. I think that it's important to just take a deep breath and actually realize like, this is not as big of a deal as I'm making it. I'm blowing this out of proportion. My brain is tricking me into thinking that this is something I shouldn't be doing or I should have been doing. And, just having a little compassion for ourselves. You guys, it is a long life. People are like, oh, you only have 4 summers left with your kids. Shut the fuck up, Brenda. I have a whole lifetime. Listen, I call my mom 14 times a day. I guarantee you she wishes she had 18 less summers sometimes. She's like, can you stop calling me? I'm working. I'm busy. But I really think that like just allowing ourselves to take a deep breath, like we don't have to capture every moment. We don't have to get every single little thing in there. It's going to be okay. Your kids are going to come out on the other side. And if you're like, I'm really fucking my kids' lives up. Yeah, you are. Like you're blowing their lives up and that's okay. They're going to survive. I don't love when people are like, kids are resilient, because I think that yes, while that's true, like I don't want to lean on that and bank on that and be like, well, I can just pave my way through this and you're going to come back resilient, because resilience, in my opinion, like equals a lot of resentment. But I do think that it's important to know that like we are harder on ourselves than we need to be, and our kids are going to have issues regardless. Whether it's my mom was around too much and she was hovering, or my mom was not around enough and she worked too much, or my mom sat around too much and was lazy, and my mom worked too much and never sat down with us. Like we can't win as parents, and that's okay. That's just like the human condition. We are not created to be perfect beings. So that's number one. Number two, set some realistic expectations with your kids. Set markers for yourself. Here's what I mean by this. And this is something that I think this is the most tangible takeaway, hopefully, from this episode, and something that's helped me the most in this process. Especially like if you work from home, if you work at all, or even if you just have stuff to do, like I have to get through emails, or I have to pay bills, or I have to get to my workout class, like all priorities are equal in some way or another. And setting an expectation. So when the minute your kids are old enough, even like 2 years old, and saying like, hey, mom has to work today. I'm going to work from this time to this time. And then we can spend some time. Think of some things that you want to do when I'm done working, that we can plan on doing together. Now, don't be an asshole and not deliver on those things. But also now you've given yourself a 1, 2, however many hour window. It's like, okay, you have 2 hours to get those things done, and then you get to go be present. It makes you more present in your work because you feel like you've set an expectation with your kids. You've communicated, right? Like this is the core of any good relationship. Our kids are no different. Communicate with them. Hey, mom has to work today. Here's the hours that I'm going to be working. When I'm done, we can do this together. Or even if it's, hey, I need to make dinner. Give me 30 minutes. Let's set a timer. I think that when they're younger, especially, like really making it clear with them, because what happens is like we overpromise. We tell ourselves too many things. We tell our kids too many things. And that is like when I think like shit hits the fan sometimes, is you feel like, oh, I've overcommitted to too many things. And of course, like it doesn't matter if you have kids or no kids. If you've overcommitted to somebody and you can't deliver on it, you're going to feel guilty. And so add the element that like you feel like you should be their like savior and you should be like their perfect mom. And like then you're not delivering on your promise. It's going to be like 10x the amount of guilt. So setting the expectation, setting markers for yourself. This is something that as a parent who's not with my kids all the time, they're with their dad half the time. They'll leave. So I have them on Mondays and Tuesdays, for example, and like they'll leave on Wednesday morning, and I'm like, man, I feel like I just like didn't do what I wanted to do. I wasn't present with them, or I worked too much, or I said I was going to sit on the couch and watch Gilmore Girls with them and I didn't. And like, I think it's really important to set your intentions, whether you're with your kids all the time or not all the time. In the beginning of co-parenting, when I was kind of just trying to figure this out, I would make lists for myself. What are some of the ways that I can intentionally be present and pour into my kids on the amounts of time that I have them? So with Baylor, that might be throwing the baseball. With the girls, it might be like sitting at the table without my phone, painting our nails, or watching Gilmore Girls on the couch. That's like our go-to show. There are like a few inappropriate moments, but whatever. They're sex ed. And just really like knowing with your kids, like what's going to fill their bucket, so to speak, and then being able to actually deliver on that. You don't have to like be like eye to eye with your kids all the time. Like, what are you doing? How's it going? What's happening? Like, where are you? What do you want to do today? Like, you're going to be a pain in their ass. I can guarantee And then I think at the like real core of this, and I think this is maybe why like where some of our mom guilt really does come from, is feeling like we don't deserve self-care, right? Like, well, I chose to have these kids. I chose to do this. This is a short season of life. I only have 18 summers, blah, 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 blah. You have to realize like you cannot pour from an empty cup. And I know it is oversaid and overused, but there's a reason. There's a reason stereotypes exist. There's a reason popular phrases exist. It exists because it's true. If you are not out there taking care of yourself, prioritizing yourself, being the best version, the happiest version of you that can exist, your kids are going to feel the weight of that. They're going to see it. Kids are wildly intuitive. It's almost all they have to rely on at this point, right? Like they're not there with street smarts and knowing like, oh, mom, you're probably feeling mom guilt, aren't you? No, they just know like, you good, mom? Like you seem like upset, or you seem, like sad today or whatever. If we can show up as like the most whole version of ourselves for our kids, they are going to benefit greatly. But we cannot do that by showing up entirely for them and not at all for ourselves, right? So we have to pour into ourselves. Figure out a couple things. What is it that like makes me feel good, makes me happy, makes me feel like I got to check my box today, and do those things. Because when you have that time then to spend with your kids and to be intentional with them, you're actually going to be present and not thinking like, God damn it, I have to fucking build a Play-Doh house when I really should be at the spa right now or something like that. Not the spa, but you deserve happiness too. And if you think you don't, you are doing your kids a far greater disservice by being dishonest with them and not giving them the happiest, most fulfilled version of you. Remember, at one point, they are going to be adults. They are going to know the whole story. How many times have you felt like you look back at your childhood and you're like, that was a lie? Oh my gosh, I see through that now. The goal is that our kids look back at their childhood and be like, good or bad, like I know my mom was just hustling. I know my parents were just working hard to be the best version of themselves. Your self-care is not selfish. Your kids still can be a priority. They don't have to be your number one priority. Go love yourself, love your kids, and rest easy knowing you are simply doing your best, and that is more than enough. Thanks for listening to The Summer of Me. You can listen to episodes on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can watch on YouTube. Come hang out and follow my chaos on Instagram at Kendra for now. See you next time.